How's everybody doing out there in podcast land? Welcome to the latest, greatest episode of the Fortress of Rock, episode 160. Recording here on September the 6th, 2024. I, of course, am your most humble, most gracious host, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Nice, breezy, calm Friday night here outside the Fortress of Rock studios. I hope it's just as nice where you are, if not better. Something tropical maybe could be a little bit better, but this is perfect. But of course, that means we're only a month and a half away from the nasty stuff moving in. So let's enjoy it while we can, and let's enjoy our rock and roll. So let's start off with news of the world as we always do. Our tribute to the late, great Freddie Mercury and Queen. Some health updates, some health issues for some of our most famous and favorite rockers. A lot of this stuff impacting touring, some of it not. But the two that have really been in the news all over the place over the past week are, of course, Brian May, guitarist for Queen, has disclosed that he is recovering from a minor stroke. The good news is he is recovering, and the prognosis looks like a full recovery is definitely on the horizon. So hopefully Brian May, along with Queen, will be back up and at it. Maybe in 2025, hopefully. And then, of course, the recently retired, at least from the road, retired Elton John also disclosed that he has been dealing with an extremely serious eye infection that has given him partial blindness in an eye. But, again, very good news. Just like Brian May, Elton John is on the road to recovery, should get his sight back gradually, eventually. So both issues with Brian May, Elton John appear to be just bumps in the road of life. Nothing overly serious. Now, for those of you who are listening in Germany, unfortunately for you, an off-duty injury, let's call it that, a non-performing injury for Scorpions guitarist Matthias Jobs, where he fell down a flight of steps, broke his heel, broke a pinky finger. That injury has forced the Scorpions to cancel 5 dates they had set up in Germany in September. So bad news there again for those of you in Germany, or those of you who are going to Germany to see the Scorpions. Those dates in September are now canceled. But more good news, road to recovery. Matthias Jobs will heal up. I don't think the Scorpions are done quite yet. And then finally, for me personally, this is an odd story. And I'm taking this from one of my main sources, ultimateclassicrock.com. And the reason why I'm specifically attributing this story to them is because it just seems very, very odd. Now, Kevin Cronin is the last classic lineup member left with REO Speedwagon. I don't say original because he was not an original member of REO Speedwagon, but he was a driving force throughout their commercial heyday, starting in the late 70s, going all the way through the 80s. But somebody who was also with Kevin Cronin throughout the same time period and up to the present is Bruce Hall. Again, not an original REO Speedwagon member, but Bruce Hall has, just like Kevin Cronin, been with the band since the 70s and all the way through to present day. Now, keyboardist Neil Doughty recently retired from the road, leaving Cronin and Bruce Hall as the sole remaining members from that classic, let's call it the high infidelity REO Speedwagon lineup. Well, Bruce Hall recently had to have back surgery in 2023. Now, he has been cleared by his doctor to perform, but he has still not rejoined REO Speedwagon on tour. This summer they had that very odd pairing, which I believe still has a few more shows left on the agenda, with Train and REO Speedwagon. Just a very bizarre, odd double bill. But Bruce Hall has not been playing with them. This is the part where I'm skeptical of the reporting. I'm skeptical of what Bruce Hall is saying. I'm not saying it's not true, but if it is true, this is one of the most bizarre stories out there, and it would be a big-time shame on Kevin Cronin if this is true. But Bruce Hall says he is not being allowed back on tour with REO Speedwagon because his posture, yes, his posture, ever since he had back surgery, doesn't look good on stage. I find that ridiculous. If the man is healthy and the man has been cleared by his doctor to resume performing, why isn't he back with REO Speedwagon? Even if he has to sit on a stool to perform, what's the big deal? We've seen that happen with many other bands, many other times. So again, I'm trying to stay objective here, but if Bruce Hall is being kept from rejoining REO Speedwagon on the road because of bad posture, like I said, that's on Kevin Cronin, because you know he's calling the shots, and that would be a big, major ego failure on the part of Kevin Cronin to do that to the one member left from the classic REO lineup. Now, in other touring news, the reunion that none of us asked for. I know there's some of you out there who actually do care about Oasis, so I'm sure you're ecstatic about them getting back together, the Gallagher brothers. And we've talked here over the last week or so about how they've kept having to add shows. Now they've added 2 more shows, putting the grand total up to 19. They've added shows on September the 27th and September the 28th at Wembley Stadium. Now keep in mind, this is 2025, not this year. They're not playing Wembley Stadium in a few short weeks. This is a year from now. Because there has been no promoter, there has been no band that isn't more than happy to take my hard-earned money, your hard-earned money, and keep it and earn interest on it for a year before they actually play the show that you bought tickets for. But I digress. Now, I don't think we touched on this last week when the news originally broke of Oasis getting back together and setting up this 2025 tour over in the UK. Some shows in Ireland as well. But just like with Taylor Swift, Ticketmaster, Live Nation failed miserably. Bruce Springsteen comes to mind, another situation within the last few years where dynamic pricing and long waits in queues online have just destroyed the fans. I mean, the spirit, the passion just gets doused when you end up not being able to get tickets, even though you waited in front of your computer screen for hours and hours and hours, and you did everything that Ticketmaster or Live Nation asked of you. This is why everybody hates Ticketmaster and Live Nation. So now supposedly these two new shows that have been added at Wembley Stadium for Oasis, the boys aren't happy about the situation with fans getting shut out. And if that's the case, good for them. So they're trying to, with these two additional shows, it's a very convoluted system or setup from what I can tell, but they're trying to do this in a sort of invitation-only setup where people who missed out on getting tickets for the previous shows will be able to somehow get into a, I don't know if it's a lottery or what it is, where they will be allowed to buy tickets with top priority. We will see how this plays out. I don't have a lot of faith right now in these bands and these promoters and these venues. I've shared all my frustrations with you guys this year. Of course, Queens of the Stone Age got postponed. Have not heard anything back on that yet in terms of a rescheduled date or an opportunity for refunds. I've told you about my fight with a local venue here with Night Ranger and Jackal, and how it's been a month since that show was supposed to have taken place, and the refunds for those tickets have not been issued yet. So this has not been a great year. The shows have been great. The ones that have actually happened have been phenomenal. And of course, in segment 2, we will discuss Sammy Hagar on the Best of All Worlds tour with Loverboy. But even that one had a lot of hiccups and bumps in the road, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. So again, we'll see how this Oasis situation plays out. I'm guardedly happy, optimistic of how the Gallaghers are handling this so far, trying to take care of the fans on the surface. But again, they're going to hold on to your money for a year before you actually get to see them. And what are the odds that they're going to still be together in a year? Now, an interesting conspiracy theory has arisen around Oasis and another big reunion announcement that just broke here within the last day or two. Now, I could care less about Linkin Park, but I know they do have a very passionate fan base, just like Oasis. Linkin Park is coming back. Of course, it's been quite a few years since the suicide of Chester Bennington. Linkin Park is returning with a new female lead singer, Emily Armstrong, as well as a new drummer. They're announcing a tour and an upcoming new album called From Zero, which will be out November the 15th. So, again, I'm not a Linkin Park fan, so I really don't care one way or the other on this. But this seems to me, this would have been a great situation to just start a brand new band with a brand new name. Anytime you bring in a new lead singer, especially, I've got to believe Emily Armstrong is going to sound completely different from Chester Bennington. Just suck it up, start a new band, and then plaster it all over the rock and roll press that, 2/3 of this new band is formerly from Linkin Park, something like that. But they're going to market it the way they're going to market it. They're going to do it the way they're going to do it. But the conspiracy that I just alluded to with Oasis and with Linkin Park is that these are very appropriately timed reunions. Let's put it that way. Linkin Park is just getting ready for their first year of eligibility for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And of course, Oasis, while they have been popping up here and there on fan ballots, they've never made the final cut and actually won induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So some cynics, some conspiracy theorists, I would never ever partake in that kind of talk. But just very interesting timing. And is this a sly, sneaky way for these two bands to push their prospects for getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2025? Stay tuned. We shall see. Now, the interesting thing, if you guys have ever been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's been a long, long time for me. I've been there once, went to Cleveland, made a weekend of it, went to see Genesis, and made a weekend of it, like I said, and we stopped by the Rock Hall of Fame the afternoon before the Genesis show. Something they have now, I don't believe they had it back, you can tell, since it was Genesis and it wasn't this farewell tour that we just witnessed a few years ago. This was a long time ago. A long time ago. So we're probably looking at close to 20 years. So now they have a voting kiosk inside the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame where you can stop by if you have bought a ticket for admission to the Rock Hall of Fame. You can vote in this little kiosk. It's called Voice Your Choice, where you can let them know if they really even care, because it's not anything official. It doesn't impact anything. The upcoming ballot doesn't impact anything one way or the other. This is all strictly for fun. But again, when the fans get to speak and speak fairly and speak clearly, the disparity between what the fans want in terms of who should get in and what the panel members, the expert panel members and the critics, and of course a lot of rock and roll stars who are already in get votes, the disparity just blows my mind. And as I would expect, the fans once again come through with flying colors. Just a sample here of 3 of the top 5, but the last I checked, about a week ago, Iron Maiden was number 1, and the fans' Voice Your Choice. Styx was number 3. Motley Crue was number 5. Again, much, much different than what you would expect from what you will get from the so-called experts who actually get 99% of the voice and the vote for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All right, so we'll move on from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame potential future nominees to some gentlemen who are already in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I normally don't like to talk about reissues and box sets because they have gone so far over the top. They become unwieldy, ridiculously expensive for normal people like you and me to even think about purchasing. This one's a little bit more interesting. Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Long After Dark, one of their best albums in my humble opinion, is going to get a deluxe reissue. Now luckily that doesn't mean 8 CDs and DVDs and fake concert souvenirs and tickets and backstage passes and all that nonsense. There's a little bit of that superfluous nonsense in there, but basically this boils down to a 2 CD and unfortunately Blu-ray audio version Now, why do I say unfortunately? Hey, if you have the capabilities to listen to Blu-ray audio, I'm ecstatic for you. I'm happy for you. That's great. But the problem is when they stick that in with the two CDs that we really want, you jack the price up and make it more unaffordable. Again, $30, $40, $50 for these sets, and those are the ones that are on the lower end. It's ridiculous. Really what we want is the remastered version of Long After Dark, which is of course one disc, and then the second disc has 12 bonus tracks, including 5 culled from French TV appearances. And a lot of these songs are rarities, alternate versions. I've looked at the track list for that bonus disc. It's very interesting. Very interesting. I would love to get my hands on that. But again, I already own Long After Dark, and I don't want the Blu-ray audio. So I'm only interested in one chunk of this Long After Dark reissue. And I'll say it one more time. Unfortunately, that's how most of these deluxe reissues and box sets work, is they're trying to get you to pay for music that you've already paid for. And I just don't like it. I hate it. Now, Soundgarden pulled this off quite a while back, because of course you know that we lost Chris Cornell. We just talked about Chester Bennington. Unfortunately, we lost Chris Cornell before Chester Bennington in similar circumstances. But Soundgarden kind of did this where they took out the bonus material from a much larger project, and then they made that available on a separate CD for the fans, because they knew that most Soundgarden fans like me, for instance, would have owned or have bought almost everything else that was in this big conglomeration. And that's what these bands and these record labels need to do. I know they don't want to, but I still think they would make more money. It'd be better business. It's better for them if I buy that one disc with those bonus tracks with the French TV versions of songs than I buy nothing at all. But of course, they don't think like that. They're not smart business people. Yes, I'm being cynical again, but you ask anybody in the music business, they'll tell you the people in the music business, for the most part, are very stupid people. And that's another prime example of it. We could talk about the whole ticketing fiasco. We just referenced that with Oasis a few minutes back. You would think the music business and the performers would like to tell Ticketmaster and Live Nation to go jump off a cliff. But they don't. They take it and they take it and they take it. Pearl Jam tried to fight them, failed. But again, the music business is not smart. And then, of course, Bruce Springsteen. We mentioned the ticketing debacle with his last tour and the dynamic pricing, and how he, being the, I'm sorry, despicable human being he is not a good human being, people. He is not. And I have brought up numerous instances to prove that point. And of course, the most recent was where he basically ridiculed fans who were complaining, saying, "Hey, I'd love to see you, Bruce. Can't afford $3,000 for a ticket." And then he comes out with the absolute shallow promise that if the show is not worth it, I'll give you your money back. Sorry, but there is no concert, except for maybe We Are the World, Live Aid, something like that, where there's dozens and dozens of bands and it's a historic moment in history. Sorry, Bruce, I don't care. One of your concerts is not worth $3,000 to me. And if there's a Springsteen fan out there who says it is, then you need to check yourself into the loony bin. Because you're talking about multiple months of mortgage payments. The logic, again, defies me. But anyway, Bruce Springsteen. I'll tone down the vitriol now, kids, I promise. Bruce Springsteen, if you want to watch a documentary called Road Diary, which actually covers the preparations for this tour that I was just referencing, it will be on Hulu and Disney Plus October the 25th. I'm on the fence about watching this. If it comes down to it, if we get a week where I don't have a new album to review, don't have a concert, maybe I'll watch it. But after getting burned the last couple times that I've sat down and devoted hours to awful documentary series about music, yes, Bon Jovi and that awful PBS disco travesty, I'm very, very leery now about these projects. So I'm just telling you it's going to be out there October the 25th. As far as a review here on the Fortress of Rock, we'll see. And then if you jump over to Instagram, you can hear a snippet of Unfinished. Of course, Unfinished is the partial instrumental that Eddie Van Halen and Alex Van Halen put together. Of course, this is tied into Alex Van Halen's memoir, Brothers, which is coming out later this year. They're making a big deal about the fact that the entire track, Unfinished, again, probably not the quote-unquote entire track, will be on the audiobook version of Brothers, which of course is Alex's memoir. But if you want to jump over to Instagram, check out Alex Van Halen's Instagram page or feed or whatever the kids call it. You can listen to a short snippet of Unfinished. Then finally, wrapping up news of the world. It looks like everything is hunky-dory now with all these bands that have been fighting in the courtrooms. We talked last week about Journey and how everything is copacetic, it seems like, with Jonathan Cain and Neil Schon now. And it looks like we have a resolution when it comes to the issues with the Guess Who. They have resolved their trademark rights dispute, and although there are no details at this point that are being released in this settlement, it looks like it involves shared rights for the Guess Who trademark. And the best part of this is that Burton Cummings and Randy Bachman both sound very optimistic about this deal. Of course, they played extreme hardball, as we talked about here in the past on the Fortress of Rock, where they were revoking all rights to play songs that they authored or co-authored just to keep what they call the cover band out on tour, calling themselves the Guess Who, from using those songs. So Cummings and Bachman seem like they're very relieved, and it sounds like they are opening the door, keeping open the possibility of future music. I don't know if that would come under the banner of the Guess Who, but see, it's not all negative. I can spread some joy and some positivity when it comes to the world of rock and roll. And I'm going to do even more right now, because as we end News of the World, that means, of course, we slide on into segment 2, which is Breakdown, our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Of course, we just talked about them a few minutes ago. This is where we review the best the best in new music. Now, here's the deal. We've got our concert review of the week. And it's a big one. It is one I have been looking forward to for months and months, and in a way, years. And that, of course, is the Sammy Hagar Best of All Worlds Tour. Loverboy, of course, opening up. But the main purpose of this tour is to get as close as I guess we're ever going to get to a Eddie Van Halen tribute tour. We just recently talked about Alex Van Halen and the sad news that he was auctioning off basically everything in terms of drums, memorabilia. He's basically closing the book, literally and figuratively, on his time with music and Van Halen. When I say literally, of course, I refer again to his memoir, Brothers, coming out later this year. So this is it, kids. This is the closest we're going to get to a Van Halen tribute. Now, of course, I'm recording this on September the 6th, so the tour is over. I got to see the second to last show, which was last Friday. We talked about the fact that Jason Bonham had to leave the tour with roughly a week to go because of a family emergency. Now Sammy Hagar has disclosed more details about that. It appears that Jason Bonham tried his best to stick it out and stay with the tour. His mother, unfortunately, it looks like had a stroke. Then when she lapsed into a coma, I think that's basically when Jason Bonham said, I have got to go back home. This is not good. And of course, Sammy can be a good person. I think he's 70% good. He says, yes, go. You got to go. Take care of business back home. And it was lucky enough to bring in Kenny Aronoff on drums at the last minute, who has played with him before on Chickenfoot shows where Chad Smith had to leave because of commitments to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And Kenny Aronoff is the consummate professional, of course, played for years and years and years with John Cougar Mellencamp. So that was not a concern to me. That was not going to be any kind of a hindrance or a damper on the night. And of course, like I said, this was last Friday. This was at the Ruoff Music Center outside of Indianapolis in Noblesville, Indiana. The problem, as it turned out, was the weather. The weather caused a few issues that, of course, had to ruin what was otherwise turning out to be one of the greatest concerts I had ever seen in my life. But what we'll do is we will take you through the entire timeline from beginning to end. Of course, as I do with albums, track by track. With concerts, we will go song by song. Now, I'm going to just give you a general overview of Loverboy, because I went through their show last year when they were with Foreigner. They haven't changed things really much, if at all. So again, I'm just going to give you a quick overview of Loverboy. Okay, so we knew going in that there was a mild concern of weather. Didn't really register on our radar, no pun intended, until we settled into our seats. It was packed house. Should have been recorded as a sellout if it wasn't. It was very, very close. Sammy said over 16,000. We heard over 17,000 people there. But the first indication that there was going to be trouble was Loverboy started up 10 minutes early. And that is very rare. Very, very rare. I've been burned by it once or twice in the past, but this time it was obvious that it was due to weather. And Loverboy got to play their full set. So again, it didn't seem like there was a huge concern other than maybe on the tail end we're trying to beat something that's going to move in late at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock. As the show started, was supposed to start at 7, started at 10 till 7. Loverboy still got their first full set in, 50 minutes. And as I mentioned, not going to break it down track by track, but you know, they played all the hits, all the favorites. I did have issues with one member of the audience. And I have tried to, over the years, become a lot more understanding, not only of what I can do at a concert and what other people want to do at a concert. In years past, I've dealt with nicest people in the world who are drunk off their butts and started puking halfway through the show. Then you deal with other people who are just nasty from the beginning to the end, plastered to their phones, sticking their phones in your face so they can record from the best possible angle instead of actually putting the phone away and watching the show. But then, of course, in this case, you've got the late middle-aged woman who is a Loverboy fanatic, and she's 2 rows ahead of me and has to be the only person in the entire crowd standing up through most of Loverboy's set with her fingers poked in the air, you know, showing everybody, look at how awesome of a Loverboy fan I am. I know that's one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing, when it comes to going to concerts to deal with. Is stand up, sit down. Stand up, sit down. What are we going to do? And the worst of that part of concert going is when you get somebody who is completely oblivious to the crowd around them. Nobody else, as I mentioned, standing up except for her. You don't want to be the rude jerk who yells, sit down. You don't want to be that guy, and I was not that guy. That's why they have video screens, I guess, so I could watch Loverboy partially on video screens while this woman trying to reclaim her high school glory days was dancing around. Her husband, of course, wouldn't do anything to tell her, hey, do you see anybody else doing this? You thinking about the people behind you, the 3 or 4 rows behind you, who might actually want to watch the concert? They paid money too. And I'm sorry, ladies, don't take this the wrong way. 9 times out of 10, it's a woman. Because you guys don't care what anybody else thinks. You might think that makes you independent and awesome and strong. No, it makes you an idiot. It makes you a selfish idiot. Read the room. If nobody else is standing up, sit down. You can enjoy the show just as well seated as you can standing up and trying to reclaim your glory from 40 years ago at your high school prom. Okay? Alright. So, Loverboy played what you would expect at the end. They played Turn Me Loose and then closed out with Working for the Weekend. Luckily, by those 2 songs, everybody had decided, well, let's all stand up. So I got to enjoy those 2 songs. The one she ruined for me, the woman a couple rows ahead of me, was my favorite Loverboy song, The Kid Is Hot Tonight. And I was just gritting my teeth the whole time. And I know my friend next to me and his wife on the other side of him, she had to be at least partially obscuring their views as well. But like I mentioned, same set list roughly from what I could tell as what they played last year opening for Foreigner. So we're not going to get into all the gory details on that. Loverboy is competent. Loverboy is solid. Loverboy is fine. Spectacular? No. No. And this is a band that I grew up with, just like the woman 2 rows ahead of me. First 2 albums are ridiculously good. 2 of my all-time favorites. Of course, Loverboy and then Get Lucky. But in concert, you've heard the stories. If you haven't seen them, Mike Reno has put on a lot of weight. We've all gotten a little heavy in our late middle age, but yeah, Mike Reno really went to town on the pies and the cakes, it looks like. So it's amazing to me he's still up, standing, doing this. Good for him. And of course, Loverboy, 4/5 of the original lineup, still with the band. And unfortunately, the 5th member, the bass player, passed away years ago. Probably the only reason why he's not with the band. I know that sounds a little bit obvious and maybe mean-spirited. That's not how it's meant. That is not how it's meant. But again, solid, competent rock and roll. Then we get to Sammy Hagar. And again, the entire show is running 10 minutes early. So Sammy came out 10 minutes earlier than expected as well. A friend of mine, my friend's wife, actually, she was able to find, I think on Facebook somewhere in between Loverboy and Sammy, where she showed us that the exact amount of time that Sammy was supposed to play, that he was parceled out for. It was going to be 2 hours and 10 minutes, which is what he had been playing at all the other stops, all the other shows. So Sammy comes out and starts tearing it up right away with Good Enough. Of course, the first song on the first album that he ever did with Van Halen, 5150. Of course, we all know how that starts off. The glorious, "Hello, baby!" And they went from Good Enough to Pound Cake. From Pound Cake to Run Around. Then Sammy decided, well, let's slip in one of my big hits, and I love this song. This might be arguably my favorite Sammy Hagar song, top 3 at worst. And that, of course, is There's Only One Way to Rock. And back in the days when I did see Sammy Hagar with Van Halen twice before, and I remember that was one of the highlights, even though I'm sure Eddie Van Halen did not like playing Sammy Hagar's solo material. That was definitely always a highlight when I saw Van Halen with Sammy, was anytime they ripped out There's Only One Way to Rock. Then, ironically, the 5th song of the night, deep track from Van Halen, Judgment Day. Off of course, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. And then, you've got these images on the screen behind him of doom and gloom, and of course, rain and storms. And sure enough, we're looking back behind the stage to the west, and we can see lightning moving in. So after Judgment Day, Sammy was told he had to pause the show to let the weather cell move through. Now, he tried to stay out as long as he could, told a story, but then he ended up going backstage. They asked, luckily we had seats under the pavilion, but they asked the people on the lawn to head back to their cars or seek shelter, and they would be allowed to come back in and given warning as to when the show was going to start up again. Very, very, very few people. This tells you about the stubbornness of people in this day and age. Very, very few people took the warning, heeded the warning. So by my watch, It was a 40-minute delay. And then I don't really think they gave much of a warning to the people out in their cars. These people, of course, were told to follow the Ruoff Music Center on social media. But the funny thing is, and again, I can be abrasive when it comes to the intelligence of people. But this is another example of why I'm like that, is because after about 25 minutes, the video screens flashed a message saying the show has been postponed. Please go to social media to find out details about a rescheduled date. And of course, we all start freaking out, like, are you kidding me? Yeah, obviously, we drove 2 hours to get to the venue. I'm sure other people drove, a lot of other people drove at least that far, if not longer distances. So for about 10-15 seconds there, we were all up in arms. Are you kidding me? Come on. Because the weather radar was showing a massive break in the system. Then, all of a sudden, the screen changes and says, oh, good news, the show will resume soon. It never ceases to amaze me how some people just should get fired from their jobs immediately. No sympathy. You got one thing to do, one important task to do, and you screw it up. Okay? Think about if you had somebody watching the missiles at a NORAD silo and they decided, whoop, I screwed that up. I know we're comparing nuclear war to a concert, but still, do your job right, especially when it's a very simple job. So, a few minutes later, Sammy and the boys came back out. Of course, the boys being, as I mentioned, Kenny Aronoff on drums, the great Michael Anthony on bass, and Joe Satriani, who of course has had to learn all these Van Halen guitar parts. And with a few exceptions, I didn't think he was all that sharp on the opening song, Good Enough, and then maybe one other time throughout the set. But otherwise, he was brilliant. And so they come back out on stage and start up with Panama. Rarity, because if you've read any of the press, you should know by now, Sammy does not like to do David Lee Roth era songs with Van Halen at all. And he actually sang Panama. So that was very cool. And then the highlight of the night for me, one of the highlights, let's say, 5150, the title track from the first Van Hagar album, if you want to call it that. I love that song. It is one of my top 3 all-time Van Halen songs. By the way, they played all 3 of my 3 favorite Van Halen songs. So 5150, stellar, ridiculously cool. And then they stuck with the album 5150. We got Summer Nights. Then Michael Anthony takes over lead vocals for a David Lee Roth era classic. Again, one of my personal favorites. Ain't Talking About Love. Sammy comes back out for Top of the World. And then Best of Both Worlds. So that was the third of my 3. I got 5150. I got Best of Both Worlds. And then I got Ain't Talking About Love. Those are my 3 favorite Van Halen songs. And it's weird because 2 of those 3 are Sammy era songs, yet I will by far and away always defer to David Lee Roth as the greatest Van Halen vocalist. Not even close. Then Joe Satriani got to take over the spotlight playing Satch Boogie. I believe that's off Surfing with the Alien. And then we get another deep track, and this was one of the highlights of the night as well. The Seventh Seal. Lead-off track off of Balance. and it was great. A great, great song. Um, and right now, I just want to give Sammy credit. I'm not trying to spoil the rest of what's coming, but it seemed like he wanted to keep this a more up-tempo, rocking set. He could have got stuck in a lot of Van Halen ballads. And once we wrap this up here over the next couple minutes, you'll see what I mean, where he deferred to songs like Judgment Day and The Seventh Seal, where he could have stuck a cheesy hit ballad in. So I give him a lot of credit for putting together this set list the way he did. So Seventh Seal, and then Right Now, and then we get Why Can't This Be Love. Then, even though he dedicated it to the Bonham family, which was a nice gesture, the one song of what we got last Friday night that I didn't need was Eagles Fly. I'm just not a big fan of that. Of course, that was off the solo album he did when he was in Van Halen. He was contractually obligated to do another studio album, so Eddie jumped in, helped him produce it. I believe Eddie played bass on the album. And Sammy's always been proud of Eagles Fly. Not my favorite. But then, of course, that is when the man came out again. Yes, the man who had to come out, walk center stage, whisper in Sammy's ear that we've got another bigger weather cell moving in. We've got to shut this down real quick here. Basically telling him, you've got time for one more song, Sammy. And so Sammy jumped ahead in the set list a little bit and said, well, I can't leave you guys without playing I Can't Drive 55. So we got that. And then he tried to stay out on stage again for a few extra minutes. He and Mikey were screwing around, did a really quick a cappella minute or so of Cabo Wabo off of OU 812, which was the only, by the way, the only snippet we got of anything off of OU 812. Now, bad news is that ended the night. Sammy said, if you want to stick around, you can stick around. There are still a few more songs left that we'd like to play for you, but we don't know if we're going to be able to play them because this is going to push us really late into the night. There's a curfew. Now, Sammy said he would go past the curfew and pay for it if he had to, but that was before he knew the second storm was moving in. So we figured that was it. We got an hour and 45 minutes. That's a pretty solid night of rock and roll. We were supposed to get, as I mentioned, 2 hours and 10 minutes. So that was the end of the night. But now I tell you what the rest of the set was supposed to look like. After Eagles Fly, we were supposed to get Mas Tequila. And then, this is the one that kills me. After that, we were supposed to get Heavy Metal. Sammy Hagar's Heavy Metal. Now, I've heard it before. It's phenomenal live. So that hurt. Now, if this had been a normal show, this is where he would have played I Can't Drive 55, but he jumped it up, fit it in as quick as he could to close out the night, given the weather moving in. There was a medley of Space Station number 5, of course, Montrose, Bigfoot, which I missed. I wish I could have got that as well. A little bit of Chickenfoot. Would have loved to have heard that, Bigfoot. And then third part of the medley was going to be Jump. Of course, the Van Halen classic. And from what I've read from other concerts, that was another one where Michael Anthony was going to sing. Now, the closing song of the night was supposed to be When It's Love. I don't know why. The stellar job Sammy Hagar did putting this set list together. I don't know why you would make the one massive, grave misstep of choosing to close out the show with When It's Love. Now, that would have obviously been the one full song that they would have played off of OU 812. But now, if you've noticed, that's the end of the night. And like I mentioned, the 4 songs we did not get. Just think of what was left on the table. I mentioned a few minutes ago, of course, the ballads. Think about the 2 big hit ballads off of 5150. Dreams. We did not get Dreams, right? Think about the fact that we didn't get off of OU 812 Finish What You Started. Kind of blows me away that those songs were left out of the mix. We didn't get Rock Candy, the Montrose classic that he normally plays. That I can understand a little bit, since he was trying to make this a very Van Halen heavy night. Of course, the other ballad I did not mention off 5150 is Love Walks In. So a great set, an up-tempo, upbeat, rockin' set. Did not shed a tear because we missed out on When It's Love, but definitely would have loved to have heard heavy metal and that medley with Bigfoot and Jump would have been awesome. So how do I grade this? How do I look back at this night? A very bizarre, very eventful night. The show was still stellar beyond belief. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this review, would have been one of my all-time favorite shows if it wasn't for the weather delays and the weather cutting the show short. But I still got 95% of what I wanted. I could have lived without Mas Tequila. Like I said, I could have lived without When It's Love. But I did get my 3 Van Halen favorites. So this was still a fantastic, awesome concert. Will go down in my personal concert ledger as one of the best. Could have been better. Again, no thanks, Mother Nature. Some people, of course, joking about it was Eddie Van Halen, showing a little bit of his disdain, saying that, I'm not there anymore. You guys don't get a free pass without me. Then other people were like, Eddie's going to make the weather blow over so we have a glorious night. Well, not so much, but a great, great show. Obviously, with the tour over now, can't recommend you to go out and see it. If you didn't see it over this past summer, then I'm sorry. Sammy, though, seems like he's discovered the fountain of youth. I say this all the time. For his age, the energy level he brings, he still sounds good. He's smart enough to kind of take it easy or take a back seat when needed. Obviously, letting Michael Anthony sing a couple of the old Van Halen songs. So I think we're gonna get more Sammy Hagar. I think that's a no doubter that in 2025 or maybe 2026 we will get another Sammy Hagar tour. I don't think he's going to abandon the Van Halen stuff, but this particular tour, bringing out some of the deeper tracks, very cool. So kudos to Sammy, did a great job here. Kudos to Joe Satriani, Michael Anthony, and Kenny Aronoff. So that leads us into our reviews for our new music of the week. Is it really new music? No, not really, but yes, kind of, sort of. Let's stick with the Van Halen connection with our 3 songs. Let's start off with David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth has been releasing a lot of videos on YouTube, a lot of cover songs. We've talked about Baby Driver and Baker Street and 8675309. Now we get Mississippi Power. Mississippi Power is actually a David Lee Roth song from the sessions for Your Filthy Little Mouth, but this takes you back. This reminds you of the greatness that David Lee Roth could achieve at times in his solo career. And Mississippi Power is a great, great song. Now, this is not included on the original pressing of Your Filthy Little Mouth, so it's very hard to find. That's why we're going to go ahead and review it here, is because very difficult to find, and even for me as a Van Halen fanatic, this was the first time I'd ever heard this. So like I said, very solid. You can tell by the title, it's going to be a little bit of a blues rocker. And once again, the best part about it probably is that we get David Lee Roth vocals that are almost 30 years younger than what we're getting now. So voice is stronger, voice is more confident. I would go out there on YouTube. The video is nothing spectacular, but the song is very, very good. Get out there on YouTube and check out Mississippi Power from David Lee Roth. Now, why was I saying, well, the new music we're going to review this week isn't really all that new? Well, I just pointed out that this particular track from David Lee Roth is going on 30 years old. The other two songs are cover songs. Now, normally, I don't really like to do cover songs, but sometimes they reach out to me and they say, you've got to listen to this. It's such a unique combination of song and performer, or there's a good backstory. And there's a great backstory with Bryan Adams, and we've talked about this here recently. His new record label, Bad Records, where he's decided to launch that with his versions of two songs that he wrote in the early 80s for the album Creatures of the Night for Kiss, co-wrote. Of course, we, a few weeks back, talked about Rock and Roll Hell. And now, this is where it gets really tricky, because now the second song is War Machine. And the reason why, to me, this is trickier is because War Machine became a Kiss concert staple. So it's really synonymous with the band, and it's synonymous with Gene Simmons. And with Bryan Adams, towards the end of his big run in the 80s, you had great albums like Cuts Like a Knife, and Reckless, and Into the Fire. But then he started to get a little bit too wrapped up in the ballads and lost, in my opinion, a lot of his rock and roll street cred. So when you look at that, you look back at that, and he's tried to bounce back over the years, and he's tried to put out some solid rock stuff. But for him to tackle War Machine, a song that, yes, he co-wrote, but he gave up, and in this case gave to a better group of performers in Kiss. It fits them much better than it fits him. Just look at, again, the rock and roll personas we're dealing with here. But I will give him credit in that War Machine, his version of War Machine, is solid. It's not spectacular, it's not the be-all, end-all, but it's very solid, very competent, similar to what we heard a few weeks ago with Rock and Roll Hell. So it's nice that he has reclaimed these two songs, trying to make them his own. He does a very good job with both, and I'm especially impressed with the fact that he was able to take War Machine and really make it serious for him. It doesn't come off as any kind of a joke, or it doesn't come off as awkward or weird. Very solid. Check out War Machine by Bryan Adams. Keep in mind, again, this is a Kiss staple now, but he co-wrote it. So he does have a claim to this song to a certain degree. Then finally, Motley Crue. Oh boy, starting to really have issues with the Crue. Now, I mentioned the fans at the kiosk at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame earlier, how Motley Crue was number 5 in terms of the voting in this kiosk for who should be the next performer into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But Motley Crue is not doing a lot to help their legacy. We've talked about over the last few years the ugly breakup with Mick Mars. I, of course, gave you my review of their stadium tour with Joan Jett and Poison and Def Leppard. And one of the very, very rare, very few times where I walked out. Not all their fault, but at the same time, they didn't help matters. The Lucas Oil Stadium sound down in Indianapolis was dreadful, especially if you were in the upper bowl like we were. But all these things add up. Now, I recently read a review where Motley Crue played, I believe it was the Minnesota State Fair, and the article I happened to come across online just ripped Vince Neil to shreds. Can't sing anymore. Why are they even continuing on like this? John Five is a very generic guitar player compared to Mick Mars. And so then Motley Crue decides, as we discussed, I believe it was last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, that they're going to put out a 3-song EP. Not a full album, a 3-song EP. And if you look on Amazon right now, you got to pay $11 for the CD. For 3 songs. For 3 songs, $11. That's just stupid. But of course, now we have heard 2 of those 3 songs. Of course, earlier in the year, we heard Dogs of War. And the 3rd song is going to be Canceled, which I believe is the name of the EP as well. But the 2nd song, the 2nd release, is Motley Crue's cover of the Beastie Boys' Fight for Your Right. I will give them a B+ for effort, but probably a C- for execution. I guess this song, as we're talking about Bryan Adams, how War Machine doesn't necessarily fit on the surface with his personality in the rock world. Fight for Your Right kind of does fit with the Motley Crue vibe, and so to that extent they do a good job with it. They change up the line. Oh, Ma, you're just jealous. It's the Motley Boys. Okay. Mildly clever. And they make, of course, the guitar parts heavier. So they put their stamp on it that way. But otherwise, this is a really unnecessary remake. Doesn't really serve much of a purpose, in my opinion. I say stay away. I will say stay away from this. It's not awful, it's not abysmal, but it's just, again, unnecessary, and it's really a waste of your time. Just go back, and if you want to listen to the song, listen to the Beastie Boys version. I don't think anybody's ever going to do a better job than the Beasties. So, again, you wonder where Motley Crue is going now. with a lot of these issues that I've just mentioned over the past few years. They're becoming a caricature, a joke of themselves live. So we'll see what the future holds for Motley Crue, newly reconfigured with John 5 on guitar instead of Mick Mars. All right, so now it is time. I'm heading out to the garage here at the Fortress of Rock. Getting into the rock and roll DeLorean. Doc Brown already strapped in, getting the DeLorean fired up to 1.21 gigawatts. Segment 3, of course, each and every Friday night is I Wanna Go Back, our tribute to the late, great Eddie Money. And while Doc is checking the dials, the dashboard, getting everything ready, getting us into the rock and roll time stream, I will quickly take care of business, as I do pretty much every Friday night at this time. You found us somewhere, but you have choices and options. Wherever you choose to listen to us, you can listen to us on Spotify, Pocket Casts, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, Amazon Music, CastBox, and Audible. And of course, great fun stuff every weekend. Tonight, as this new episode drops, of course, the Weekend Rock Project also drops. And it's out there already for you. We want your best songs, your best rock and roll tunes, featuring the words either before or after. Remember those ads? Hair Club for Men is a big one, right? Hair Club for Men, they show the guy, he's all miserable with his bald head, and then after, all of a sudden he's tanned and he's smiling and he's stunning with his big chia head full of hair. The before and the after. So that is your Weekend Rock Project. Give me your best rock songs with the word before or the word after. Then, of course, Sunday is New Music Sunday. We will post a brand new song on our Facebook page, a video, fully formed video or a lyric video, just something to get a new song out there for you every Sunday afternoon. Distract you during halftime of one of the NFL games now that the National Football League is back. Not sure yet. Don't know yet. Still got a couple days to figure it out. Not sure yet what song I'm going to go with. Now, of course, stories from segment 1, News of the World, and here in segment 3, I Want to Go Back. Got to do some research. Got to pull things off of the internet. Sometimes things will pop in my head, but a lot of times, like a great writer, you have to do your research. And my research comes from 3 main sources. Not exclusively, but a lot of the stuff. The ideas, the starting points for arguments in my rants and my ravings come from ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and the Van Halen newsdesk.com. Of course, I haven't said this in a while, but keep in mind that while the nuggets, the ideas for stories come from those sources, the opinions that I might express about the bands, the songs, the albums, those are mine and mine alone. All right, we're in the rock and roll time stream. Let's knock out some birthdays. And it seems like for the second week in a row, at least the second week in a row, getting a lot of information, a lot of stories, a lot of things involving performers and bands that I really don't like. Of course, in the first segment, we talked about Linkin Park and Oasis. And now we start off our birthdays. Born on this day, September the 6th, 1971. Dolores O'Riordan, lead singer for the Cranberries. Oh, oh. And I'm sure if she sang normally, like if she was asked to sing the Star Spangled Banner, she'd probably knock it out of the park. But the way she sings these songs for the Cranberries, it's like fingernails on a chalkboard to me. Zombie, zombie, zombie. Oh God, that that song is forever imprinted on my brain in a very bad way. Oh, so I should not be this mean because, of course, she tragically passed away way too young. But on this day in 1971, Dolores O'Riordan of the Cranberries was born. A sneaky cool dude. Born on this day, September the 6th, 1970, Dean Fertitta. Dean Fertitta. Sometimes member of Queens of the Stone Age. Member of the Dead Weather. Of course, Jack White, one of his bands. And then sometimes he tours with another Jack White band. That would be the awesome Raconteurs. Born on this day, September the 6th, 1967. Big shoes to fill, but in my opinion, he did a phenomenal job. I am waiting for a new album from Alice in Chains. Jerry Cantrell seems to be very obsessed with his solo work right now. He needs the group dynamic. We'll discuss that more once we get to wrap it up, but Jerry Cantrell needs the group dynamic. He needs to get back with Alice in Chains. It's been way too long since we heard Rainier Fog, their last studio album. And of course, the man whose birthday is today, co-lead singer William Duvall, who took over, of course, for Lane Staley. And I have absolutely loved the 3 albums that Alice in Chains have put out since the reconfiguration, bringing in William Duvall. I want more. Like I said, I want more. Jerry Cantrell, you're not as good solo as you are in Alice in Chains. Again, the group dynamic, whether it's Mark Knopfler, whether it's Sting, oh, we'll talk about him later too. The group dynamic makes a performer better 99% of the time. They just don't want to share the money. And don't tell me that's not a motivating factor, because I guarantee it is. Born on this day, September the 6th, 1961. Try not to butcher his name. Paul Wakhtar. Guitarist for the criminally underrated Aha. They are not just one-hit wonders, kids. Go dig on Spotify. Listen to some of the work that Aha has put out over the years and the decades. Some really interesting music. It's not just Take On Me. It's not just that cool video. Much, much more going on with the great Aha. And their guitarist, of course, born today in 1961, Paul Wakhtar. Born on this day, September the 6th, 1948. Cletus Charles Smith, guitarist for Kool and the Gang. Ugh. Remember what I mentioned when we first started this out with the Cranberries? Well, here we go again. Born on this day, September the 6th, 1943, one of the most vile, disgusting human beings on the face of the earth. And his band is vastly overrated. I don't care what anybody thinks. Roger Waters, born on this day in 1943. Of course, most well known as the quote-unquote genius behind Pink Floyd. Then finally in birthdays, September the 6th, 1942. Dave Bargeron. Horns, for Blood, Sweat, and Tears. So now we move on to anniversaries on September the 6th, and of course a lot of these are very sad. That's usually the way it is. So, September the 6th, 2008, the band Great White. Of course, we recently lost their original lead singer, Jack Russell. And this incident, a lot of people believe, just chopped years and years and years off his life because of the grief and the sorrow he felt. This is the day where Great White settled to pay $1 million to the survivors and the victims' relatives of that terrible 2003 bar fire started by the band's pyrotechnics, the bar, of course, in Rhode Island. More sadness on this day, September the 6th, 1997. This is the day that Elton John performed a revised version of Candle in the Wind at the funeral for Princess Diana. Of course, that version went on to become arguably the most successful song in history. On this day, September the 6th, 1990, Tom Fogerty, brother to John Fogerty, of course, in CCR, Creedence Clearwater Revival. Unfortunately, Tom Fogerty on this day died. Complications from AIDS due to a tainted blood transfusion. All right, let's get away from the nastiness here, all right, for a little bit at least. Do some chart news. September the 6th, 1986. Venus. The remake of Venus by Bananarama was the #1 U.S. single on this day in 1986. Going back to September the 6th, 1975. You know the song, you love the song, and it's not just because it's the song that Jackal opens up every concert with now. On its own, it is a tremendous, fantastic song, country song from the 70s. The outstanding, fantastic Rhinestone Cowboy by the great Glenn Campbell was the #1 U.S. single on this day in 1975. On this day, September the 6th, 1970, the final concert appearance, final full live concert appearance by Jimi Hendrix took place on this day. The Isle of Fehmarn in Germany. Now, some will say, well, he made some, appearances on stage with some other people, but like I said, this was his last final full live concert appearance. And then finally, September the 6th, 1968, on this day, Abbey Road Studios, George Harrison and Eric Clapton lay down the guts, the essentials. Clapton lays down the guitar solo for While My Guitar Gently Weeps, one of the better Beatles songs. So there you go, kids. That's your trip back in time in the rock and roll DeLorean here on the Fortress of Rock. Doc Brown turning us around, getting us back into the garage. We're going to pull up the moat. See, I did it again, 2 weeks in a row. What am I doing? Pull up the drawbridge over the moat. I cannot believe I can never get that right. We're pulling up the drawbridge over the moat. I swear next week I'll get it right. Be a hell of a thing if I could actually pull up the moat. Be like a biblical figure. Parting the Red Sea, making a moat levitate. Anyways, we're locking everything down. It's Friday night, getting ready to watch some football. But we're not quite done yet. As Doc Brown shuts down the rock and roll DeLorean, I head back into the studio. And now, of course, as you know, our fourth and final segment, it is time to wrap it up. So wrap it up, of course, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. We have looked at the present in our first two segments. We have looked into the past in our third segment. Now here in our fourth and final segment, we look to the future. And the future is so bright, I gotta wear shades. Been waiting to use that one for quite a while. I might not be able to say moat and drawbridge properly, but hey, still a little life left in the old noggin here after all for the Maestro. Alright, first up, the next 4 weeks. Here's what you got to look forward to. Next week, episode 161, dropping on September the 13th. We're finally getting back into album reviews. Next week, the album review of the week in breakdown will be the new one from The Cold Stairs. The album is called The Southern. We'll have that for you next week on the Fortress of Rock. Then we get back into live music for a couple weeks. In 2 weeks, episode 162 on September the 20th, Stone Temple Pilots, Live and Soul Asylum. Uh-oh. We must be in trouble with the FAA. They're trying to dive bomb the fortress. No. We got a Notre Dame football game here in the area where I record this, so of course all the bigwigs are flying in tonight for tomorrow's home opener. I can't avoid it no matter where I record in the studio. You're going to get some of that every once in a while, especially, like I said, on a Notre Dame football weekend. Again, Stone Temple Pilots, Live and Soul Asylum. That review in concert, again, down in Noblesville, Indiana at the Ruoff Music Center in 2 weeks. Episode 162, September the 20th. The week after that, episode 163, dropping September the 27th. Another concert review for you. Rival Sons, finally, after seeing them twice as an opener, we'll get to see them as a headliner, give you a full review of a headlining set from the great Rival Sons. Along with them, I've started to listen to this band. They're not terrible. I don't know what they're going to be like in concert. We shall see. Playing along with Rival Sons, the band Clutch. And then in 4 weeks, back to the albums. Very, very, very excited about this one. We mentioned in 2 weeks we see them live in concert, give you a review live in concert. And there's another plane. It's ridiculous. This is just ridiculous. The Fortress of Rock needs to talk to the FAA about restricting airspace while I'm trying to do a podcast. Anyway, in 4 weeks, Soul Asylum, Slowly But Surely is the new album. So in 2 weeks, you'll get my review of them live, unfortunately, as an opener, not as a headliner. And then in 4 weeks, the brand new album from Dave Pirner and Company, Slowly But Surely, episode 164, on October the 4th. Hopefully, we need a couple more minutes to knock this bad boy out. We won't have another B-1 bomber flying over the fortress. Talked about the group dynamic thing. Of course, in the last segment, got on a little rant there talking about the birthday for William Duvall of Alice in Chains, talking about Jerry Cantrell and how he seems to be more focused on his solo career. Well, we've only got 3 songs currently right now on the horizon. I'm not guaranteeing them for next week. maybe, possibly, one or two I might cherry pick here. We're still planning on the MC5 with Vernon Reid as special guest guitarist in the song Can't Be Found. I have started listening to it. That one's probably the best shot of the three I'm going to mention here to make it onto Breakdown next week. Again, the MC5 with Vernon Reid. The track is Can't Be Found. Now, going back to what I was just mentioning before I digressed, I mentioned Jerry Cantrell in his solo career. Well, the second single from his upcoming album, I Want Blood, is out. Not nearly as good. I've listened to it. Not nearly as good as Vilified, the first single. This is kind of why I got fired up talking about Alice in Chains, because this song, Afterglow, again, we'll review it here in the next few weeks on the Fortress of Rock. I'm not impressed so far. Maybe it'll grow on me, but Afterglow, after a listen, is very underwhelming. And then I also mentioned Sting when I mentioned the group dynamic and how, of course, the Police, to me, 15 times better than Sting's solo career. Now, Sting has done some good stuff as a solo artist, but I would have been much more interested and intrigued to see and to hear what some of those songs would have sounded like if he had Andy Summers and Stuart Copeland backing him. Of course, we talked here months back about Sting and his new band, Sting 3.0, I think he's calling it. This new power trio he's put together. So maybe the group dynamic will come back into play here. Who knows? But there is a new song from this new Sting power trio. Now it's just under the Sting umbrella, so it's not like there's a new band name or anything like that. And I'm not overly encouraged by the title of the song. Titles are a big thing to me. I think I dabble in writing, and I think writers love to get that core idea, that nugget of inspiration, and a lot of times it's the title, whether it's a title for a book or a movie, or in this case, a song. So the new song from Sting is I Wrote Your Name Upon My Heart. See, to me, that sounds like a follow-up to that awful power ballad that Bryan Adams did for that Robin Hood movie with Kevin Costner. But that's just me. That's just me. Who knows? This could end up being the greatest song of the year. I doubt it, but who knows? I have not listened to this one yet. But we'll have a review for you within the next couple weeks here on the Fortress of Rock. And then finally, of course, our tribute to the Billboard music charts back in the day when they actually mattered, when they actually made sense, the 70s, the 80s, even into the very, very early part of the 90s, before SoundScan took over, and then it got even worse with digital, and now it's just a mess, a disaster. The charts do not mean anything to me anymore, and they should not mean anything to you. This is kind of a rarity for our number one album. I don't like to do this. I normally stay away from it, but didn't really listen to a lot of new music this week. Of course, had the concert. Listened to all those remakes with David Lee Roth and Bryan Adams and Motley Crue. So when Amazon dropped off my copy of The Southern by the Cold Stairs earlier today, I immediately popped that in, listened to it a couple times. So at the very last minute, coming in through the back door, forcing its way to the top spot after just one day of release. The number one album here on the Fortress of Rock is the Cold Stairs. their new album, The Southern. And now we're going to play kind of sort of Deja Vu with our top songs of the week. Of course, I'm picking two, as I always do, because I like to cheat when it comes to songs and give you a couple songs that I've been listening to the most. When I say we're doing Deja Vu kind of sorta, we're not going back to last week completely and totally. We're going back to episode 158 2 weeks ago. And the two songs that were number one in that episode of The Fortress of Rock are number one in this episode of The Fortress of Rock. So of course that means for the third week in a row, Freak Accident by Soul Asylum is one of our top songs. And then jumping back into the top slots, Mortality Blues, the final track on the brand new album from the Cold Stairs, The Southern. So once again, your top songs of the week, Soul Asylum, Freak Accident, and Mortality Blues by the Cold Stairs. And that's going to do it here for the Fortress of Rock on September the 6th. Hope you have a fantastic, safe weekend. I know it's a little bit depressing now. We've gotten through the long Labor Day weekend now. We got a couple months where things are just kind of depressing because the weather gets bad. There's not really any paid holidays until we get to late in November, of course, with Thanksgiving and Black Friday. Of course, here at the Fortress of Rock, the Black Friday is a glorious day because that is always when we try to go see Jackal, and this year is no exception. That is a concert review coming in late November for you here on the Fortress, but try to enjoy the last few weeks of great weather here in September while we've got it. October, usually the first part of October is nice. I'm talking about here, where I reside, where the Fortress of Rock studios are. Those of you who live in Texas or California or Florida, that you can discount this because it doesn't apply to you, because you've got great weather pretty much the entire year around with a very few weird exceptions. But enjoy it. Football's back. If you're into that, have a great time with the NFL this weekend. First full weekend of NFL action. College football in full swing. If you're going to a concert, enjoy it. Otherwise, love the one you're with. I'm the Maestro, Kevin Crane. You are who you are. We'll talk to you again in 7 days, kids. Until then, peace out.